Hello and welcome to the Hexagon. I'm Ellen Wiles, and in each episode of this series I'll invite a guest to tell me about their 5 top arts and culture tips for life under lockdown and beyond, and I will offer a 6th tip myself. I'm delighted to welcome my guest for today, who is a creative writing colleague of mine, John Wedgwood Clarke. John is a senior lecturer in creative writing at Exeter University and has been out and about over the past year working on various creative writing research projects that have taken him back to West Cornwall, where he was born. He left when he was 18 to train as an actor at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama and went on to get his PhD in modernist poetics from the University of York. It's been a long tour around the UK to get back west, a journey via the directorship of an Arts Council literature organisation in East Yorkshire and lecturing at the University of Hull. He's led major funded projects, most notably a creative writing and swimming project as part of the Cultural Olympiad, a Leverhulme Arts Fellowship in a marine biology department, and as poet in residence at the Rubbish Dump. Much of his work explores the way literature can shift the line between trash and treasure. His latest project, funded by the AHRC, explores the value and meaning of a polluted river down in West Cornwall, exploring it as an anti-pastoral response to the many poems celebrating more beautiful rivers. So thanks for joining, John. Could you start off by telling me briefly how lockdown has been for you? Have you managed to find much time for arts and culture? What's it been like?
In amongst all the tidying up, I've got sons. The impact of having them in the house all the time, feeding them. Wow.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of moves every day you have to make in order to keep your domestic thing afloat. I found it. Yeah, I've done quite a lot of reading, a lot of walking. It's not always been easy though. I think the sense of the time opening up has sometimes made me feel like a little kind of money spider on a gossamer thread, sort of wafting around, not quite sure what I'm in relationship to. I mean, obviously I've had a very easy lockdown in respects to the experiences of other people I've had. So I think it's that, and if you're interested in poetry, you're always interested in small, tiny little things. But I've had even more time to get intimate with the aphids on the roses, to go round and look at all the little wildflowers that I put in my tiny lawn, rather ridiculously, which most of them have died because the people who lived in the house before just fertilised the lawn to bits, so it's a bright green thing. But it's those kinds of things that I've really enjoyed doing a bit of baking and actually seeing my children respond to this very difficult situation in ways that have felt to me really mature. They've not complained, they've got on with it, they've actually been really responsible, and now lockdown is sort of lightning. They are absolutely loving getting out, seeing and roaming.
Yeah, mine too, for sure. That's great. And could you tell me about a couple of highlights of your working life over the past year? So that might be before lockdown or even during.
The Red River project has been really preoccupying me for the past 12 months. This is a project about a polluted river down in West Cornwall that I grew up, because I grew up in St Ives, so I could see it across the bay. That there's a lighthouse in St Ives Bay. I don't know if anybody knows that, the Virginia Woolf Lighthouse. Well, when I was growing up, after a big storm or after they've been pumping out the mines, the river would flow red into the bay and stain it throughout. And I just thought this was marvellous as a young boy. It's like somebody taking a big paintbrush and just washed it in the bay and made it this rusty orange. And when they remedied that back in the 1990s, partially remedied because it comes back every now and again, I felt a weird nostalgia for these major pollution events. And I thought, this is really interesting to interrogate. What is it about that industrial landscape, that bit of Cornwall that's often hidden away, that is so central to some of the myths of industrial Cornwall and Cornish masculinity in particular? My uncle's a fisherman. There were still miners. There were quite a lot of miners out at St Just, and God, they were a tough rugby team to play against. And so you did have this kind of big shadow across you. So I'm quite interested in ecology, landscape, and the way in which it sort of gets in psychologically to, the subject, the lyric.
It's a fascinating project. I'm glad you managed to get a lot of the the work on it done before lockdown.
Oh,
So
so am I. But the other thing that I've been working on is a collection of poems that are really quite different, a kind of memoir sequence about growing up in St Ives, and it's really, really different. It's about a family upheaval, and it was in the middle of writing the Red River poems, I realized I had this material that I needed to get through before I could actually get to the Red River. So there's been a project nested within a project, and the two are talking to each other, but they're quite kind of discreet.
Wonderful. So now, time for your first arts and culture tip. What's it going to be, and why are you recommending it?
It's Ted Hughes' letters. Ted Hughes' letters. Now, I think during lockdown, I felt that erosion of a sense of meaning and a context that comes from spending a lot of time on your own. And I was struggling, to get some writing done. And I just thought, I'm living in the West Country. I need to revisit these letters and read them all and read all of Ted Hughes' work, just, because I'm swimming in his rivers. I'm walking in, not his, what I mean? Sometimes it does feel like they are his, but, so I thought I need to reread them. And I was just absolutely blown away by his sense of vocation. I think that really steadied me, his sense that reading and creativity were writing poems were absolutely intertwined, inextricable. And the way in which he read things with everything he had was really, really important. Memorizing stuff, having it off by heart, living with some key texts, knowing Shakespeare inside out. Okay, doing some slightly unusual things with it, when he writes his book about Shakespeare, but that and his interest in his children's lives, and his struggle with his own relationship to Sylvia Plath, and the rather tragic unblocking. It's not tragic because he gets the birthday letters out, but he realizes at that point, he held on to them almost too long. Great descriptions of landscape, and if you're into fishing, amazing. I mean, it just describes almost a landscape that it's almost unimaginably fertile, and it's only within sort of living memory. And there's one anecdote in it that I really loved. There are so many good things, but one real sad one. Pike, his great poem, Pike, describes going back and discovering that the Pike Pond, or at least one of the Pike Ponds, has been turned into a rubbish dump. And it's just kind of, you just realize this landscape's changed so much over such a short period of time. And I had a newfound respect for his ecological passions. He's in there at the very forefront, worrying about chemical runoff from the landscape, rivers, and and sustainable farming. So yeah, really, really good read.
Fascinating. And the letters, are they published over a number of years, and who are they addressed to? A range of different recipients.
From his first girlfriend all the way through to there's a really wonderful, lovely affirmatory letter to Matthew Sweeney, who's died recently. To Prince Charles, all kinds, because he was quite into the royalty. He's got that. And the other thing about it that he made me remember is the importance of dreams, of connecting up the public life with the very, very intimate psychic life that he is very, very keen on. Okay, it leads him to some sort of slightly crazy fascinations with horoscopes. I mean, he even writes to Philip Larkin. Larkin's dying, but a month away from death, and Ted Hughes writes him a long poem about this faith healer, that he can put him in contact with because he's got a great record in curing cancer. So it's all kinds of shamanic, sort of nutty stuff in there, but at the heart of
it, as time goes on,
get a sense of him authorizing his own vocation in any way that he can, of stabilizing, creating systems of knowledge that may seem obscure, but which secure his practice. And I think that is really exemplary.
Excellent, thank you. And for your second tip, I think you have another poet and more contemporary poet.
I do. Fiona Benson, who was one of our arts and culture fellows over the past 18 months. Fiona lives just outside Exeter. There's some poems in her latest collection, Vertigo and Ghost, about places to swim along the river. But it is an extraordinary re-exploration of the Zeus myth. the book is in two halves. The first half is this re-exploration or rewriting of the Zeus myth, with Zeus as a rapist and an abusive man. It begins with a poem that's all about female desire and hope and sex and desire to get out into the world. And that poem then runs into the arms of this abusive relationship, which is then told through a very, very, I mean, a really exciting experimental way that is very accessible. It's like a whole series of witness statements and archival footage and, you know, what purports to be descriptions of webcam, you know, or CCTV footage. You get this fragmentary piecing together of this traumatic relationship that's clearly smashed someone to pieces, but which is so coherent, so emotionally coherent. And I think this then follows through to the rest of the collection, and poems about motherhood and fearfulness and worry about the future for the daughters of the voices in these poems. Yeah, they are very, I think she has an extraordinary ability to be completely possessed by an idea and to sing it out. It's completely unfakeable. There's a quality of flow in her writing and a musicality and an urgency to the rhythms that's kind of, you know, it's got so much craft in it, but it's unself-conscious craft. It's just in service of this desire to absolutely get to the bone, the emotional bone of the matter, but with great intelligence. So it's, you know.
Yeah. I think I've heard her talking about writing that Zeus poem and how it all came out in quite a rush, and that there is that feeling in it of momentum and propulsion that makes it really compulsive reading. But yeah. I'm so glad you picked it, because I think it's such a fantastic collection, but it's also just really timely and topical in the age of Me Too, and you know, it's one of those must-read books.
It is absolutely one of the most must-read books, and it also links. It sort of there's a poem called White Nose Disease, which is about a disease which affects bats, which then feeds on into her poems about insects. I think she's quite interested in things being taken over by external forces. It could be something within oneself which disturbs one's own psyche and threatens to take it over at various points, but she works it out in her. And everyone should, you know, click through the link, which I'm sure will be appended to this, to go through some of her poems about insects, because there's a terrifying one about a fungal thing that attacks grasshoppers, turns them into zombies. Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Arts and Culture Exeter link, which we'll post beneath this video, and their audio poems with some fantastic images to accompany them. So I would really recommend that too.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And how about your third tip for today?
Well, I've moved away from literature as instructed, so I've gone to comfort viewing. I watched Wolf Hall when it first came out, the one, the BBC Wolf Hall, and I'd seen Mark Rylance perform in the Foundations of the Globe when I lived in London. He played Prospero. And I've always thought he's an actor with such integrity, such a complete intellectual engagement with the whole process of the theatre, but also, again, like Fiona, somebody who's able to completely transform it into feeling. I think his stillness throughout that performance is just so compelling. There's so much going on inside that mask. It's an absolute masterclass in film acting. And I've got a kind of personal connection, because I did interview Hilary Mantel when she was in the first stages of this, and she just went Beyond Black, and I love Beyond Black, and you know, I'd got her up to do an event about Beyond Black, and I was sat with her having a glass of wine. I said, "What are you up to?" And she said, "I'm listening to it now. They're talking to me. They're with me, even as I'm talking to you." Oh, well, Hilary, get on with it, do it. You know, this idea that she's kind of got voices. Which I think, you know, I just, you know, again, she's one of those sort of total writers, you know, I love that idea. So the stillness of that, and I'd also been reading, you know, the final section, and the bit where Mark Rylance talks to his sons. I just absolutely love that little bit when he tells a story about the Bolsonaro boys and how they flogged off some fake statue to some church and then sold off their horses. And it's just a sudden eruption. He sings a song, and then they ask him how he is, and they tell his story. It's just a beautiful moment of release in what is a kind of relentless exploration of power.
Fantastic, thank you. And how about your fourth recommendation?
Right, we're going to Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix for this, to The Last Dance. I didn't really know much about basketball or even that much about Michael Jordan, but I started watching this and I just thought, oh my God, they are like angels. There's something just as they approach the hoop and they kind of levitate and then they slam dunk it in, and the feints and the movement, the little shifts and shimmies that they perform to trick somebody and then rotate the ball and it sort of goes out of the back of the hand and into the just beautiful. It's a kind of form of dance, competitive dance, whatever. But it's the characters. It's the articulacy, it's the intelligence of these basketball players that makes it so compelling, and the politics of the game. Here's a game owned by white people, played predominantly by a lot of great black players involved in it, often struggling. Not in the case of Michael Jordan, but there's a character called Scottie Pippen who, because he comes from a poor black background down in the South, when he gets his break, he signs a contract that's hugely detrimental to him, but he does so because he wants to secure the future of his siblings and his parents. So he just takes it, and then he lives with the consequences of that for 7 or 8 years and fights back, tries to strike, tries to, renegotiate, but they won't renegotiate. So he finally refuses to play. It's really dramatic. There are so many great narratives, and Michael Jordan has this wonderful line, because he likes to gamble. And of course, because he's so perfect, somebody tries to take him down and, point out that he's got feet of clay and to suggest that he's got a gambling addiction. He says, I don't have a gambling addiction. I have a competitiveness addiction. I just thought, man, you really do. He just will not be beaten. And it's beautiful. Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, if you're into sport, you're into competitive stuff, it's a great documentary, beautifully told, backwards and forwards with some extraordinary footage.
Yeah, I'm someone who doesn't watch that much sport, but I've heard fantastic things about this documentary, so I'm really keen to delve in, and your recommendation has only spurred me on further, so thank you. And I think you've got one more for today. What's that?
Finally, Chopin's Fantasie in, I think it's Opus 49. I just put it in because my father-in-law gave my son, who was obsessed with buying some vinyl, a second-hand turntable, a realistic one. He got it from a charity shop. It didn't have a needle, but it did have a cartridge. So we just replaced the needle. We finally got an amp. We got some speakers. Lo and behold, we could play vinyl again. He has one record. I have plenty of records. So on the turntable, during the early days of lockdown, I just went through all my, classical music records, as well as some of the other stuff that they found rather embarrassing. But some stuff they actually did want to listen to. But I went to at the Guildhall, and it's a combined drama and music place, and so I was exposed to a lot of music early on. We used to get free tickets to go to the Wigmore Hall, and to go to. I was just, and so I started to have deep love of and gathered some records, and I like this particular one. Just because it seemed to be so locked down. It seemed to be so exploratory. Its tempo changes, the way in which a motif sort of leads into another one, and it's a fantasy. It's an improvisation. It's kind of almost jazz-like, but with all the structures, knowledge of classical music in there, and it's just got some beautiful, quiet passages in there after the.
Yeah, great. I think you've recommended the Ashkenazy recording, isn't it? I love Chopin piano as well. I mean, I did a music degree originally, so I also have a background in it. And I remember being at quite early age being given a CD of Pellini playing Chopin piano, which I just listened to over and over again. So that's always sort of my favourite version. But Ashkenazy is incredible, and yeah, it's such uplifting music as well, such deeply felt music, and yeah, really great for right now. So thank you. What a lovely range of tips. So I think it's time for my tip for this episode, which is going to be a podcast from the series Shortcuts, which is one of my favourite BBC podcasts. It's presented by Josie Long and produced by Ellen McDowell at Falling Tree Productions. They always create these really excellent original audio shows. So the series strapline is brief encounters, true stories, radio adventures and found sound. So each show involves a series of very short documentaries. They're curated around a theme, but they don't fit the usual definition of documentaries. So they're really varied in style, from sound-rich audio poems to short memoir sketches, and they can be hilarious or poignant or just kooky and eye-opening. So one really great and timely recent episode, especially at this moment of the Black Lives Matter protest movement, is called Words to Live By. And it's about how the words of musicians and writers have helped people, often other artists, to navigate difficult times in their lives and even shape their identities and their sense of who they are, sometimes in quite radical ways. So there's this lovely sliver of James Baldwin talking about the power of writing to connect people and how sometimes a writer has to disturb the piece. There's a segment about the poet Mary Jean Chan talking about how discovering Asia and Rich's incredible poetry about queerness and the importance of being who you are helped her to come out in Hong Kong, where she grew up, and to write her first collection of poems exploring that. There's also this piece where Damien Labat, who's a writer with a Romani gypsy background, talks about how he grew up listening to older gypsies and travellers in his community singing these songs that he'd always thought were from their culture, but only realised when he was older that these songs were actually blues songs from the deep south, and then how he discovered these unexpected resonances between the two cultures through these lyrics and melodies. So I would highly recommend any episode of Shortcuts, but if you're choosing one, that would be one I would pick out. So that is it for today, I think. Thank you very much for sharing your recommendations, John. Always good to chat. And thank you so much to all of you for watching. Hope some of these arts and culture tips will inspire you wherever you are and however locked down you are right now. And as we've mentioned, links to all the tips will be posted beneath this video, and there will be more episodes coming soon. So I hope to see you next time. Thanks, bye for now.